Okay, you're live. Thank you.
Great. Welcome this evening. And I'd like to call to order the Open Space Land Acquisition and Farmland Preservation Committee meeting it's our regularly scheduled meeting of Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021 at 6 p.m. In doing so, do I have a motion to approve last month's minutes?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting of February 23rd, 2021.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Unanimous, okay. We do not have anybody in the queue for public comment, but of course you can make email to publicmeetings@rockyhillct.gov for any of our meetings, including Farmland meeting, and get credentialed to speak at the public comment section at the front of the agenda. That being said, we are lucky this evening to have a guest speaker and somebody to spur on discussion topics. We have Alicia Cornelio, the president of the Rocky Hill Garden Club, amongst other duties in the gardening world. And Alicia, why don't you give us your resume and what you're doing, and just jump right in. We do have some information in your packets as well at the back.
Okay, good. Yes, I have spent the last 3 years as president of the Garden Club. I'm stepping down next month, but I've agreed with the club that I would continue to be the connection between this body and ours. If you have any questions or want to consult about anything to do with, nature and gardening, we're all experts. In 2007, I did go through the Master Gardener program, which is very comprehensive with UConn, with 2 very comprehensive exams I passed. And for the last 7 years, I've been the editor of their newsletter that comes out quarterly and write many articles about gardening topics. So that's basically where I am. I used to be a librarian. I am now retired, so I know how to do research as well. And on that note, I do hope everybody received the fact sheet that I asked Ray to disseminate, because there's no sense reinventing the wheel. And this organization, whose mission is to encourage community gardens, has an absolutely comprehensive fact sheet on how to plan a community garden. And as it states in the beginning, there are going to be a lot of ideas that are not going to be pertinent to this group, because a lot of it has to do with many groups that are private, that want to start a community garden in a municipality themselves, which is not applicable to this group. But so, as you're reading through, just, consider that it's very comprehensive, and a lot of the points are not going to apply to this group. However, it gives you a lot of food for thought. And I just want to start by saying that the first thing really is, determining your goals for why you want a community garden at Straska Farm. And I'm just guessing that based on, the title of this committee and the referendum, that your main goal, from what I understand, is that you want open space and farmland preservation. And if you agree, then I am going to guess that probably the community garden piece is more of a nice to have rather than a major goal of this committee. So I don't know how you feel about that.
I think if we were to take a little survey right now, you'd find out it's a major goal of this committee. I think we're all very
Really?
supportive of the community garden aspect. We don't, and I'm not going to speak for myself, but folks jump in. I mean, I think we want it to be we want the site to have the multi-facet, preserve the farm for the farmers, but with the rest of the land, we want it to be productive in a way that is a community farm, an educational component, so to give back to the community that purchased it.
Well, then I'm pleasantly surprised. I do wonder if this group has reached out to the community to see what the response will be, because it will depend on your plan about how many beds you're going to create initially, and just how large you want this to be.
I think part of that is we're looking at this in a number of phases, where the first thing was obtaining the site, and then there's a parcel A, which is the larger part that the farmers have access to, and there's parcel B, which is where a lot of that equipment was staged. And now, over the next few months, it'll be about stabilizing parcel B, making sure it's safe for the public, pulling off old material. There's a house there now. So there's a lot of planning. So I think we definitely want the public to be involved. We want to make sure that if we put something in there, that it's lasting. But also we want to do it at the right time, because we don't want folks to, show up with their trowels and their watering cans and have a house be there right on there. So there's some research that we're doing. But I think certainly speaking for myself, I think I would like to see participation from the public as part of this committee. And, I think the public would, if it's going to be a success, would take a large part in actually running what's going there. We meet, about once a month, but sometimes meetings get canceled if we don't have an agenda. Like, we're not going to be involved in day-to-day running of the community garden there. We're going to try to do what we can to set up a program that hopefully is successful and runs for a long time, and maybe, get some resources allocated when we can. But yeah, without the buy-in from the public, it's not going to be a success. So that public participation part will be very big once we get off the ground.
Okay, well, that being said then, looking at this fact sheet, forming a planning committee is the first consideration. And I was just wondering if you are going to have a subcommittee that is just going to be dedicated to the community garden planning. That's something you should be considering, and who you would like to head up that, and who you would like to participate. So that, to me, is your very first consideration for this group to discuss, so that you can, get an organization that is dedicated and involved, so that it will happen. After that, it'll be choosing the site. Now, I understand that you already have a parcel, and you're stating that you want it to be fairly large. So I guess your next decision will be how many beds are you going to have and where it's going to go. And of course, the biggest consideration is access to water. You want to make sure it's in a sunny spot and that you have access to water, because if you don't, it's going to fail. Plants need water. So as you're deciding where it is going to go, or if you have a subcommittee that, that is going to be formed, that is one thing they're definitely going to have to decide. And then, of course, there's the preparation of the site. And what Ed was telling me is that you're still remediating the soil and getting the site cleaned up. So I'm assuming that you probably won't start this community garden for another year. Is that correct?
John Mayer or Ray, I mean, we can't, I mean, in terms of timetable at this point, until we really start getting the house and the other pieces of equipment off there, it's hard to gauge.
Yeah, I think it's more along the lines as we probably won't have it ready so that because you have a season where you have to start planning and doing things, and I don't think we'll be anywhere near meeting that, but I think it's more like you put in some good points about water, sun, and so on, so we could start tracking or looking for good spots to put in. But we do have could be a few months of cleanup as far as the what was left behind, as well as soil cleanup. We're doing the testing and all of that. So if I was going to put down a bet, I would say next year is a sure thing, but this year is a long shot.
I think it might also depend what people want to do. One of the things that you mentioned was how big we want to make it. Some of that's going to depend on the public. I think one of the words that comes to my mind is scalable. I mean, it would be nice to have a site that's secure, that has access to water, that you mentioned. Sunlight is obviously big. I don't know if that means we have to do potentially any tree work, because there's some areas that are very overgrown. But somewhere we can go on and you can kind of see how it would build up. Maybe it's a certain number of beds, and then hopefully if it's a success, we've got room to add more. But potentially if we had some infrastructure laid down there, if people wanted to, plant garlic, do fall crops, maybe if things go really well, that would be an option. Some bulbs or something like that. I'm not sure. We've got a lot of work ahead of us in the planning stages, but yeah, I don't think people are going to be growing tomatoes there this year yet.
And in adding to that, Chris, determining what the beds are going to be used for and who it's going to be open up to. And so those are considerations. Are you going to have membership? Are you going to have dues? Who is going to assign plots to people? How many plots can they have? And all of these that are outlined here in this wonderful fact sheet are things that, as you are talking and, forming your subcommittee for this project, these are things to consider. Also, they talk about insurance. Now, I don't know if you've thought about that at all, or if you've got a comprehensive plan for the entire site that would include any considerations for that activity. That's something to consider. And then setting up your organization. Now, again, a lot of it's going to determine whether this group wants to take on the day-to-day operations of running a community garden, or whether you want to set up some sort of a subcommittee of volunteers that are willing to do this. So that's going to be something probably I would, for you as a group, make this decision fairly quickly, because that year is going to go by very quickly and suddenly it's going to be planting time again. So, it's going to be good to find some people that are on board to see this to fruition. So I would strongly suggest that. Now, I don't know anything about bylaws. If you need that, it seems to me that that's more applicable to private community garden organizations that mostly give to food banks, that they're going to need, they're an organization in and of themselves. So I really don't think that applies to this group.
Alicia?
Yes?
I think in our mind, community garden means we're creating a place for private citizens, once we get organized, create the facility or the space that they come and plant their own, and they do what they want with their plot for their year. So maybe, but I know there's other communities with community farm land set aside, and it's a bigger production. Their goal is to really produce produce and put it out maybe at their farmer's market.
Right.
And I don't know, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris or John or Sandy or Brian, I don't think we've had much discussion about recommending that we get that far along. Maybe it does grow to that, but.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking raised beds, that type of thing. I mean, we'll see as it'll grow depending on the interest that we get from folks in town. I wasn't picturing anything huge. I mean, I guess there's nothing preventing people if they wanted to sell, their produce, and as long as they have the right, paperwork and all that. But yeah, especially because, the people who are appointed on this committee are done so based on the result of an election. We all could be here for, 20 years, or none of us could be, no one knows how that works out. So there's some continuity, I think, that we'd want to have, where, at least as I was envisioning it, maybe that community garden group could come to this committee and say, just let us know how things are going, maybe once or twice a year, see if any resources are needed. Hopefully there aren't that many problems, but they've got someone to report to. But yeah, as far as running the day-to-day, I don't think that we're going to be that responsive. Just by virtue of meeting once a month for an hour, and sometimes we've got a pretty big agenda, so we might not be able to devote all the time to it. And also, town staff has other tasks to do, so I think that would be kind of a challenge. So other than this being a place to interact with the town, I think, like with Ed, we have a kind of a private group that was open to the public, not exclusive, but they would run the show once it was up and running.
Yeah, Alicia, we have 3 farmers that are on, they have farmers insurance, and they're doing the more production oriented community garden, right? So they're our community garden at that level. But at this level, I think we're thinking about individuals, self-sustaining individuals coming and going, and they may not have, maybe they're at an apartment and they don't have a place to grow their favorite tomato plant. And so, we're giving an outlet to our individual residents with this particular phase of it. So,
well, I think too, to consider is that the farmers may not want the raised beds to be too close to them, or at least have some sort of an agricultural barrier to keep them out of their fields and not interfering, and perhaps helping with critter control and things like this. They're there for real production, and whereas for people that are in the community garden section are more for recreation and well-being and things like this. So I would strongly suggest, when you are designing your sections, to either keep, if there's already a barrier there, or maybe plant some sort of an agricultural barrier to separate these two, so that the farmers don't get annoyed with the public aspect, the traffic and the curiosity aspect and things like this. Because I think they're actually doing this as part of their business. Is that correct? Yes, they're not going to want the public trampling through their fields. So I don't think they'd appreciate that.
Sandy?
Yeah, thank you. We are, as part of all the phases we're going to go through, we're going to have professional guidance in laying out the land once the house is gone and the remediation is covered. And we're going to have, farmland experts helping us to set things up, so that we will definitely be aware of where the farmers are and where this land will be and what will be the barriers. That's a good point. And of course, I agree there has to be a subcommittee. I don't personally have any expertise. I don't think I'd be of any value whatsoever, and I love the idea of bylaws and a contract. And I don't care if we charge $5 for 6 months or anything, but I think bylaws, that's a great point to, instead of having it just be take your rake and your hoe and go in there and do what you want.
It can't be a free for all. No.
Yeah, that's in the troubleshooting section of this fact sheet, is how you would, deter things like vandalism, making sure people know the rules, and behavior, what they can and can't share, creating a nice meeting area for the subcommittee to meet, to discuss and see if there's any issues. So that they have a lot of good points in there that are very pertinent. And also, I don't know if you would want to consider a children's plot section. That, for
Nice.
more of a teaching thing, that might be very attractive. And, to get younger people interested in gardening. It seems like we all don't start thinking about it till we retire.
So do we, does the community, do you have to have a natural barrier between, say, folks that are growing flowers, roses, bulbs versus the vegetable garden? Do you need to keep that separate, or could they coexist side by side?
Oh, absolutely, they can. I think the consideration and what's going to make people nervous is the pesticide use. I'm assuming that farmers, being that it's a business and they have their own cultural practices, and they are probably going to be using pesticides, whereas a lot of the community garden participants probably are going to want to be organic, and they are not going to be happy if they think that there are pesticides that are coming in and tainting their beds. So I think the good solution, kind of the good neighbor concept, is to have some sort of agricultural barrier between the farmland and the community gardens, because I do suspect that anyone individual that's really interested in coming out and planting are probably going to want to go organic and not use pesticides.
And you've got the problem with GMO free, right? If you have somebody else buying seed from one place and another buying seed from another place, they probably don't want them cross-pollinating. I don't know.
That could be a problem. It depends on how serious some of these people are. I'm assuming they're going to be mostly amateurs and not think about stuff like that. And there's a lot of schools of thought on it too. I mean, I've been to a lot of lectures at UConn about GMO. You talk to the scientists and they are saying that it doesn't affect anything. Much of it is at the genetic level where basically it's pertinent only to that plant, and the cross-pollination is not as effective. But there are other people that disagree with that. And they want to make sure they're totally organic. So another thing that maybe if there's a huge response to this community garden is to even segregate the standard gardening practices to people that really are concerned about that, and maybe have a section at the end just for totally organic, as far away from the farm as possible. And that would make them happy. So that's something, again, to consider.
I think our town manager, John Mayer, volunteered to weed the garden so we don't have any Roundup.
Well, personally, I think no one should use Roundup.
I know.
Yeah.
Got me muted, Ed. I don't
caught you
remember.
muted.
I have to check the minutes.
I know weeding can be tough, especially if your neighbor's not weeding.
Well, that can be put right in the contract. If you look at, I love this fact sheet because it talks about everything. And one of the things is, as people sign up for these beds, they can sign a contract like Sandy was saying. And in it can be that you must keep up your bed. And if you don't, it will be closed and given to the next person who's on the waiting list. So, that's a good incentive. And I think that you really do need something like that, because there's a lot of people, they start off very enthusiastic, and then as the summer goes on, they just let it go to pot. And you don't want a community garden where half of the beds are full of weeds. You want to see it looking productive and making it nice for everybody. So definitely that is a consideration as people are signing up.
Would we have any concerns with beekeeping on the site with a community garden?
I think it's beneficial to the farmers as well as the gardeners, as long as it's safe enough that you can keep children away from the hives. The hives don't have to be directly next to the beds. They can be some distance away and still find the plants. After all, that's what they do. I can look that up and see what the recommendations are. We do have a bee society here in Connecticut that's very active, and I'm sure they have fact sheets of their own, and we can look into that to see, what's the optimal distance and safety situations. I don't know if anyone has been to the beautiful lavender farm down, I forget where it is.
Isn't it down by the outlet there in Essex?
Yes, it's down by the shore. I've been there
Lavender
a couple
Hill?
of times. Yes, and
And
they
there's
have,
another one in Coventry.
yes, and they have bees, but they're far away. They're way down the hill, and they're finding the lavender. I mean, it doesn't have to be directly next to the beds, and I think that's safe. Especially, I think this plot, and especially with the trails, is going to attract a lot of families. They're going to be walking the trails, and they're going to probably see their garden and you know, work in their garden, and they're going to bring their children. And so I think we need to be careful of where those hives are placed. But, you know, they are, you know, absolutely beneficial. However, I do have to say, in my own experience, my neighbor, and I don't even know if this is to code, but, you know, because he only has 50 feet wide property, but he has bees. And of course, where do they go? They come to me because I have so many things in my yard.
You have the pollen.
Yes, but what I noticed, and I looked this year, is they go to only certain plants, and what pollinated my yard mostly were native bees, and there were many of them. You know, it's one of those things, you build it and they come, and it's absolutely true. I have all kinds of different bees, mason bees, cutter bees. Some of them, they look like flies. You don't even know they're bees, and they're native, and they come because of what you've planted in your yard.
I have a question. Oh,
Yes,
sorry.
go ahead.
Do you get concerns from people in these community gardens who are allergic to bee stings? Speaking for myself, and I'm not terrified of bees, but I have to be very careful. So, you know, I understand that they travel, they go where the pollen is. How do you say you have them far away, but I know they travel. Have you had to address that, or how do you address that?
Well, it's a difficult thing because, you know, when you're a gardener, you're dealing with insects and you want them. So if you really have concerns about, you know, insects and stinging, and you're allergic, I would say gardening probably isn't for you. I hate to say that, but
Okay.
you know, you do want to attract these pollinators, because if you don't get any fruit. You don't get tomatoes, you don't get squat, you don't get anything. So you want them there, and you're cultivating and you're weeding and you're among them. So if you're afraid or you're very allergic, maybe gardening just isn't for you, because it's an integral part of the whole concept of gardening. So it can be difficult for those.
So we should, if we do have somebody with a hive, we should make gardeners aware of that.
Yes. I mean, I'm very
That's fine.
allergic to wasps, but I garden anyway. I'm careful. I watch before I grab something, you know, and I've been gardening for years and I'm still alive. So you just become aware of yourself. And if gardening is what you want to do, insects are an integral part of it.
I mean, I'd like to, on the behalf of the committee, you know, ask you to collect that bee information for us. The apiary, I guess, is the way you describe it. The
Yes.
apiary information, just so, because you have all this other stuff so organized. If you can get your hands on it without too much trouble, I think it would be good
Certainly.
information for us.
Okay. Now, who's the disseminator? Should I send it to Ray again?
Ray.
Okay, good. All right, more than happy to do that. Now, I'm willing to be on the subcommittee. I'm volunteering. I don't know if I want to head it, but I'm willing to be part of it. And if this is the decision you're making, I don't know when you're going to be forming this committee and how you're going to recruit people to the committee. You know, you can keep me informed when you make that decision. But I do think we need to start this summer at the latest for next year. So that's something to keep in mind. Is there any other questions about it at this point? It's really at the beginning. If you have any questions, by all means, email me. And if you want to discuss this again at another meeting, you know, you can invite me again, and we can talk about as we go further along, and we can talk more in detail as things, you know, gel together and we get closer to next year.
That's awesome. Yep. Any questions around the horn? Anybody?
Hey, I have a question. This is John Malero. Alicia, thank you so much for the presentation, and especially the document here that we have is very thorough, very impressive. And I'm very excited about the opportunity of doing something like this on that site. I guess my question, though, I think may lean towards Ray, and the considering and learning more about the variables involved in setting this up, and some complexity as well. We had some really good questions here. Is this something that or should we start considering as part of the overall plan, as they're removing things from site, and as they're getting closer to how to segregate the areas even more in detail? Should this be part of that plan eventually, maybe at some high level, just to start considering some of these variables?
Yeah, the community gardens have been part of the plan from the beginning, so we will be incorporating that into the overall master plan when we develop one. Community gardens may come even before we actually finish a master plan. But we do have to finish cleaning out the junk and finishing the environmental assessments and finishing the building hazard material survey for the house first, and clean all that up first. But it was, and it will be an integral part of the reuse and redevelopment of that property.
Thanks, Ray.
Yeah, I mean, Alicia, we do plan on, one of the other things, and Sandy and I always talk about it, is we want there to be a walking trail on site somehow. Now, we have to balance all these other considerations. So, yeah, we're taking one step at a time, but we've got a lot to plan for it.
Okay, well, hopefully this fact sheet will get you, started thinking as you are doing your big plan, and thinking about, where you need it, because, it is going to need sun and water. I mean, that is a must. So as you're placing it, just, if you can think of those two things, you've got half the battle won. So.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alicia.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Straska Farm update.
I'll give you a quick update as to where we stand right now with some of the activities. Currently, as of today, Zubik, our environmental scientists, have been on site finishing up some of the additional testing they could not finish way back when the property was full of more junk than it is now. They're also doing the building hazard material building assessment for the house and the outbuilding, testing for lead paint, PCBs, and asbestos. When finished, they will be providing me with a phase 3 and a remedial action plan, which will wrap into the potential site development for the barn and for the access. We need to properly plan for the location of the barn in coordination with the remedial action plan for the cleanup. There may be some issues there we have to take care of. We don't know yet. But they'll have information to me, particularly the costs of that, so I can wrap that into the brownfield grant I'll be applying for, which has a deadline of April 7th. We're signing a contract hopefully tomorrow with a contractor to clean up the rest of the junk and cars and trash on site. Hopefully they will start May 29th for that and take maybe 3 to 4 weeks to finish. That's where I am.
Ray, what date did you say?
We're looking at May 29th, which is next Monday to start. Assuming we get,
You mean March? March?
April.
March, yeah. March.
Oh, March 29th, yeah.
Is that too soon, John? Do we,
Well, he gave it off to May. And I think Chris was starting doing some ciphering with, trying to figure out, it's like 2 months off.
did I say May?
Yeah,
Yeah, no, March.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
March.
Question for you, Ray, on that. Does the council need to also review that or approve? Just more of
No.
a question around process.
No,
And that's because the funds come out of the holdback, right? And not the
the
operating budget.
combination of that and the size of the bid is within town staff approval limits.
And so just so we're clear, because I think we've got a couple different dates. You said it's going to, the vehicles and materials from we're going to start on the 29th of March. So that'll be next Monday. And how long do we think that'll take? Do I have that timeline right?
Probably, we're hoping 3, but anywhere between 3 and 4 months. Yeah, 3 4 weeks. I'm sorry, 3 to 4 weeks.
So by end of April, assuming, we don't have any environmental disasters and floods or whatever, and people can get on the site, it should be cleaned up, we think. As far as the vehicles, weather permitting.
Yeah, the trash vehicles should be cleaned out. The site still needs to be remediated.
But we're not
Yes,
going
if
to have
you-
the giant
yes, if
open
you-
van.
if you sign the contract, you're signing the contract when, Ray, you think?
Hopefully tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
And with
It's
3 to
not really a contract, it's more of a PO based on the bid document. We don't need to incur more costs associated with the contract.
And with the timelines of 3 to 4 weeks, Ray, has the farmers come back with any ideas of when they can start accessing for farming this coming spring and summer?
They plan on coming back. They can come back anytime they want. Actually, John and I will be meeting with the 3 farmers tomorrow morning to discuss the location of the gates that they'll be putting up for access. So they want to get going, but we have not heard a definite date as to when each farmer will be on site.
Ray, Box 61 was interviewing Lisa this evening.
Really?
Family-run, family-inherited farm, yeah.
Good.
Ray,
Yeah,
did you say when the house would start to come down, or did I miss that, or
No,
that point
we
yet?
don't have a timeline as for the remediation. Remediation would be for the soil and the house demolition. I'm hoping we can win a brownfield grant to pay for the remediation, including the house and the sheds, and also some site work. And
So
if we're lucky enough, hopefully we can get at least 80 or 90, even maybe possibly 100% of that
Wow.
cost covered.
So we have to wait until what we were saying, the end of April, for that clearing everything out and all of that, and then take a look, and then down the line comes the house, right?
Right.
On the line, yes.
Thank you.
Ray, when are this grant you're talking about, when are you going to be applying for it, and when will we find out if we get it and how much we get?
Deadline is April 7th. No idea how much we would get if we get it. As long as we submit by the deadline, I know DEP is, they want to clean up some of these contaminated properties. They're aware of the Nebraska Farm Project. Hopefully they can make a decision timeline as to when they'll make a decision. And many times in the past, With many, almost all of these grants, those timelines get pushed out depending on priorities at the time at the state level. So I can't tell you. I don't know how much we would get if we do get it. And it's a risk right now. As with any grant, you do not have any guarantees.
Is there a plan B if we don't get this grant?
I'm going to defer to our town manager on a plan B. That deals with money that I have no control over or access to.
We're hoping to budget money in next year's budget, general fund budget for funds for the Strasker Farm upgrades and improvements. So instead of using grant money, we'd probably have to use town funds to do that.
And then we'll probably have to do that in phases over a longer period of time if we'll be using town funds. I imagine. That's just me.
Well, if that's the case, then we're not going to be using that parcel for community gardens anytime soon. That if we can't get the site cleaned and cleared.
That's why we were saying next year's a more realistic time frame. But there's plenty of time to start working on the bylaws.
Yeah, but if you're talking about putting this money into next year's budget, I mean, so you're talking the budget coming up for effective June or
July 1st.
July 1st? Okay. Okay.
And Ray, what was the timeline for that grant? It sounds like we may have to allocate some of the funding in the budget to cover ourselves, and then hopefully, if we get the grant, not have to use all of it. Or do we think we're going to know by May, I guess?
I'm guessing based on the past, we would probably know by July or June, probably know hopefully by May. We'll be lucky if we know before we have to adopt the budget, which would be May 15th, I think.
Do we have a ballpark figure of what we think it will cost?
Not yet. That is what Zuvik is working on now. I need that ballpark figure to plug into, which is due April 7th. So.
And that includes
That's why they're out there now rushing.
Okay.
And we'll have a ballpark figure next week.
Can you email the committee when you know the ballpark? Just an info update when Zubek gives you the ballpark? Just so the committee's aware of the number?
Okay, all right.
I mean, it is what it is, but one of those things I think just for us to be informed on. I mean, we're not expecting any surprises, right, Ray? Or we just don't know?
Well, they did the phase 1 and 2, so we kind of know what's there.
Yeah.
They have to poke in more holes to access those areas that were covered by flatbed trailers and a couple of dozen vans and a Maverick and a Cadillac and a whole bunch of crap. They couldn't access, really. They couldn't access the property. So now, plus to doing the sampling for the buildings, which they couldn't access when Mr. Strath was there.
I mean, nothing was done on the way out the door. Nothing additional was done to exacerbate that on the way out the door.
Yeah, I don't think so. No.
Yeah.
It'd also be interesting to see, I guess we're still, John, I don't know if we're gonna have an update on this, but in terms of the money from the American Rescue Act, if the town gets funding, what we may be able to use, if this is considered something that we could allocate for, I don't know, outdoor recreation or something. I'm not sure if we have details on that.
I would not plan on that. I would not plan that at all.
Any other questions for Ray? Thank you, Ray. Thanks, John. John, any other business?
No. Ray, you have anything else? You
Nope,
mentioned you're meeting with the farmers tomorrow, so that's,
Right. No.
you mentioned that earlier.
How about just an information update for the committee on the two other parcels of land where farm equipment found its way to? Are we making headway with those sites getting cleaned back up again?
Yes, our zoning people are working on that. Across the street?
Across the street and down the street.
I believe down the street, they were taking that out of state. Then the other one, the guy was gonna have it cleaned out sometime in April.
If we have nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks.
Go UConn.
Good night.
Go UConn.